be speaking this morning from two different stories. And if you have your Bible with you and you want to go ahead and bookmark these with your bulletin or whatnot, the first one is the prodigal son, found in Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. The second one is late workers who were paid the same as the workers who had been there all day. That's going to be found in Luke chapter 15, verses 25 through 31. So if you want to go ahead and bookmark those, we're going to be going between those two passages. Now, you're going to find when we go over this that these stories call to mind some questions. If you're really honest, when you look at these stories, you're going to have some questions that come to mind that you just can't help but think about. The first one is, why does no one else seem to get busted when they do wrong? Anyone ever thought that? I think that when I go down the interstate, people are speeding. I say, when I was in my 20s, of course I was in a Mustang, but still, I was a target. The other one is, why do I have to work hard at some things that come easy for other people or free for other people? Another question we might ask is, why do we celebrate when someone who's been doing really bad does a little bit better when I've been doing good all along? Now you might say, well, I don't really resonate with that. Oh, yes, you do. How many of you have ever tried to negotiate out your phone or satellite cable bill? And you think, now wait a minute, if I was a new customer, I would get a huge discount. But I've been a customer with you for 10 years, and I don't get the same kind of treatment. So first of all, let's look at a parable that Jesus told in Matthew 20, starting with the first verse. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go out and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last one's hire and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." Be honest. Put yourself in this story. Wouldn't you be upset too? If your coworker worked 1 hour a day and got paid the same as you, wouldn't you be upset? Some of you might say, I have stories. We might say, that's not fair. After all, why should I work all day for a set amount and someone else work little to nothing at all for the same amount? Now, I don't know about you. Perhaps you're a lot more gracious than I am. But when I read this parable, I picture myself at the end of the line, having worked a whole day. I'd probably be just as confused and irritated as the guys in this story that worked all day and said, "I don't understand that. How can this be?" Now, maybe you've known someone who's lazy, who's entitled. Those laughters give away that yes, you do. Maybe you know someone who seems to get by always on the seat of their pants when you can't catch a break. And there's this tendency to read this parable with our own life experiences and to read this solely in the lenses of our own cultural issues. Now, we can read into this parable not Jesus' agenda, but our own agenda. We can put stuff into this parable that it was not intended to be about. and we can kind of read something into it and make it into our own agenda instead of God's agenda. If we wanted to, we could misconstrue this passage and say it's about taxes, or it's about welfare, it's about government assistance programs, immigration, universal basic income. We could make this out to be about a whole host of things that it's not really about. Let's look at what the parable is really about. Not the agendas that we might take to it. Not our presuppositions based on our American economics. Because instead, this is an opportunity to learn something about the economics of grace. Now, occasionally, if you go out to Lowe's early in the morning, I've done this, maybe you have too. You go out to Lowe's sometimes early in the morning, you might find someone out there who's looking for work. And I'm not talking about some of the people who are out there with a sign that says, I want you to give me however many. I'm talking about the people who are there wearing construction clothes and they say, I can do a few things. I can do light construction, I can do yard work, I can do this. I'm just looking for some employment. Now, that's changed a little bit over time because now we have 1099s and all kinds of laws that prevent a lot of that from happening. So you don't see that as often now. But in the culture of Jesus' day, that was not uncommon. If you did not have gainful employment regularly, what'd you do? You go out to the middle of town and say, somebody's hiring today. Somebody needs something done. And I'm going to try to see if somebody will come and hire me. Now imagine you're the person who's going out and looking for somebody. You need something done at your house, you need something done at your business, whatever it is. You hop in the car, you go down to the center of town. You're looking for somebody that can do that physical labor. Who are you going to pick first? Are you going to pick the young, muscular guy that stands head and shoulders above the rest, and his hands are worn because he's been out working? You can tell this guy works hard for work. Or are you going to take the guy who's a little bit shorter? He's older. His hands have been shriveled by the years. Maybe he has a limp. How many of you can remember as kids playing some kind of sport, whether it's basketball or football, and you had two team captains, right? And you know what I'm going to say next. They say, okay, we're going to pick our teams. And they're picking, I'm going to pick that person. Okay, I'm going to pick that person. And you're standing there, they're going to pick me next. They're going, oh, no, they picked him. Well, they're going to pick me next. And they pick somebody else. I wonder how many people here know what it's like to be picked last. Anybody out here, maybe not just in the realm of sports, but anyone out here know what it's like to feel unwanted? You see, we know, not just from this story, but from countless stories in the Gospels, that Jesus has a special place in his heart for those who are unwanted. Those that are rejected. Those that nobody else wants. The people who were picked last, or maybe not picked at all. And he goes out of his way throughout these Gospels to illustrate this. Jesus talks to the woman at the well that nobody else was going to talk to. He forgives the woman who's caught in adultery instead of picking up stones. He proclaims the faith of a Roman centurion, an outsider. Says, this guy's got more faith than all of the Jews in Israel. This guy's an outsider. Jesus recruits disciples who were the outsiders. They were not the social elite of their day. They were the fishermen. They were a tax collector that everybody would have hated. He takes people who society would have rejected, and he makes them into somebody. He takes nobodies and makes them into somebodies. He tells parables like the Good Samaritan about people who are on the outside who get it more than the people who are on the inside. We know that Jesus has a special place in his heart for the rejects, the outsider, the people that no one else wants. And I think there's this tendency, now maybe I'm the only one that does this. When I read this parable, I tend to think about those that work an hour or so as some kind of slackers. That they waited till the end of the day to jump in. I think about that story, Chicken Little, but it's just a little stage above this. Remember the story of Chicken Little? Nobody wanted to help Chicken Little. No, not Chicken Little. There's another story. It's not Chicken Little. Chicken Little, the sky was falling. The hen, thank you, the hen. Where nobody wanted to help make cakes and everything, but everybody wanted to eat some of the cake. Thank you. I tend to think about stories like that. This is a story about slackers. This is about people who didn't pull their weight, do their fair share. It's not about that. These are the last guys picked. They're standing around, not because they're being lazy. They could have been lazy at home. What do they say? Why are you standing around doing nothing? Well, because nobody's hired us. They're still out there. They're looking for work, but nobody has hired them yet. These are the runts of the liver. And Jesus shows here that just because nobody else wants you doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't want you. And just because they come in late doesn't mean that they also can't get the exact same blessing from God. Now, for the full day laborers, for the people who came in early and worked to the last minute, their problem was not in how much they got paid. They agreed to the pay before they ever started working. They got paid fairly, what was agreed upon from the beginning. That wasn't the issue. The issue was not, oh, I want more pay because I feel like I'm entitled to it, I expected more. No, they got paid how much the arrangement was. They said they'd work all day for a denarius, they got a denarius. The problem was not in how much they made. The problem, they say it themselves. They look at these other people and say, you're making them the same as us. You're making these people an unclean animal. You didn't want to come in contact with pigs. There was no getting bacon, sorry. But you didn't want to come in contact with the pig. And to be feeding the pigs, that would have been considered a dirty job. That would be a filthy job. You were ceremoniously unclean. You couldn't even come into church like that without having to go through some kind of ritual. You would have been unclean. This is a very humbling circumstance this guy finds himself in. And he's getting pig slop. And it's just this, whatever it is, just the slop. I just imagine it going plop, plop out of the bucket. And he's looking at that, and he's so hungry, he says, I wish I could eat that. I wish I could eat what the pigs are eating. Can you imagine being so hungry that you're looking at pig food saying, man, that's starting to look pretty good to me. I'm just going to imagine it's oatmeal. He's humbled by his circumstances. He says, I'll go back to my father, and I won't be a son anymore. I gave up that right. But maybe he'll just treat me as a servant. And when he returns, his father sees him from a distance, which I always think, if he sees him from a distance, maybe he was looking for him. He sees him from the distance, his father goes running to him. But what does the brother do? He has another brother. The brother doesn't see him. The brother is out doing something. He's working perhaps, but he's not looking for his brother. To him, it almost seems like, hey, he's dead to me. He's gone off, he's done his thing, he's disrespected the family, he's dead to me. So he's out working. He doesn't even know yet that his brother has returned. He stays put where he's at. But when he finds out, he runs to the scene where his brother is. He runs straight, not to his brother to embrace him, but he runs to his father with a complaint. He doesn't run with joy, my brother's back, and he's celebrating. He runs to his father with a complaint. He's got ambivalence in his heart. The father brings his son back in. He puts a cloak on him. He puts a signet ring on him to show, this is part of my family. He is still my son. He's still part of this family. No matter what else has happened, that he still embraces his son in. He picks out the finest food and he throws his son a big party. But what does the other son say? What is the attitude of the other son? It's very similar to our first story we shared. We see that in Luke chapter 15, starting with verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. See, the older son, he's not happy to see his brother again. Why are you throwing a party for him? He acted like you were as good as dead. I say, he's dead to us. Why throw him a party? Where's my party? Haven't I worked hard the whole time? But it's not about the party, is it? It's not about what he has. Essentially, the brother is saying what the workers in the first story said. You've made him equal to me. Why does he get all this stuff after everything that he did? You're making him equal to me. It's not fair. The father tells him, all I have is yours. It always has been. He's always been with his father. I imagine that this guy wasn't thinking about a party beforehand. He probably had not gone to his father and said, hey, I'd like to throw a party with my friends. He didn't want, and this happens a lot with siblings, he didn't want something until he saw his brother have it. Any of y'all ever had that with siblings? You experienced that? He probably didn't even want the party until he saw his brother have one. It wasn't about wanting a party. It wasn't about wanting a fattened calf. He had everything that his father had. He could have done with at whatever time. He was fine with all that until the prodigal son comes along. This guy over here is so clearly beneath me that he's been made equal to me. He doesn't deserve it. And yet, do you deserve? Have you earned the grace of God? Have you deserved it? If we were honest, there's probably out there people who are a whole lot more holy than we are. If we were to lay out everything bad that you've ever did, if we could somehow objectively lay out some kind of point scale, and there's not one, sometimes people think there is one, but if we could lay out a point scale of everything bad you've ever done, I'm sure we could find people out there holier than us that say, I never did any of those things. I told a lie once in the 3rd grade and that was it. And I'm sure we could find people who are a lot more holy than we are. Anytime we look down on somebody as being beneath us, I'm sure there are people above us that could also look down and say, well, I'm holier than them. So if you get to look down on them, how come I don't get to look down on you? If you want to know a secret, I was convinced the first time that I got up to preach, knowing everything that God's pulled me through, I was just so sure that the first row was going to be filled with my ex-girlfriends. They were all going to sit up there and say, oh, go ahead, preacher boy. Tell us how it's supposed to be. And then they were going to stand up and they were going to give a message and it wasn't going to be godly. I don't deserve the grace of God. There are countless other pastors out there, Charles Stanley, Francis Chan, Billy Graham. I could never even stand next to them. It's only for the grace of God that I'm saved. That everything that He's done in my life, it's only by His grace that I get the privilege of ministering to you wonderful people this morning. If we would be judged by the same measure that we judge, I'd better watch out. Because if I point my finger and say, those people over there, they're so bad they don't deserve a second chance. There's countless other people who could point their finger down at me and say, you don't either, buddy. You don't either. See, the economics of grace are different than financial economics. It's a whole other transaction system. Scripture tells us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We didn't pay for it. We did not earn it, no matter how many hours we worked on it. We did not swap goods or services for it. The gift was delivered first. It was free to receive. That's Ephesians 2:9. And in Romans 5:7-10, it tells us that no one has earned it. No one is good enough to earn their place in heaven. That some people might be willing to die for their friends, but not for their enemies. We read here that we were enemies of God. We were firmly in the enemy camp. We weren't kind of standing in between. We were enemies of God. How many of you want to go and buy something really nice for your enemies? How many after you leave here today say, I'm going to go out and pick, I found something on a commercial or a sales paper, it's real nice, I think my enemy might like it. None of us would so much as buy something nice for our enemies unless we had to. How about lay down your life for them? How many of you would be willing to lay down your life for your enemies? We were dead in our sins. We were slaves to sin. That was our master. That's who we answered to. That's who owned us. We were not out in a parking lot somewhere looking for a boss. We had a boss. It was sin. That's who ruled over us. We were born into slavery. Not employees. Slaves. And we were content to stay that way. But Jesus paid the price to buy us out of that slavery to our sins. So now we can have a new master, a kind one. Instead of beating us on our backs like a slave, we know that before He even went to the cross, He took the lashings on His back for us. He doesn't send us out to eat with the pigs, that this is a God, our Father, who welcomes us as children of God to his table and says, you get to eat with me. You're my child. Puts the cloak on us, clothes us in righteousness. Not our own righteousness. No. His righteousness. Puts the ring on our finger and says, you are mine. Even if everybody else rejects you, I want you. Even if nobody else wants you, I want you. Even if you're the last one picked, I pick you. I want you to come to my table, that you belong with me. Regardless of what we did before we ever got to that table, he does not treat us as we deserve. He does not reject us. He does not give up on us. Even if we come in late to the game. I don't know how many of you, things are a little bit different now, but how many of you in your childhood, you had to be home for dinner when the streetlights turned on? How many of you remember that? Now, Jesus doesn't say, well, you got here a little bit too late. You don't get to sit here with me. I'm going to lock you out of the house. You don't get to come in. No. Jesus says, regardless, that you are my child. Even if you came in late, you get to sit down. You get the same meal. You get the same treatment. You get the same grace. Didn't deserve it, didn't earn it. Didn't do anything to earn a place in God's house. And yet he gives it to us anyway. Who do you need to give grace to this morning? What would it look like if we gave out grace the same way that God gives out grace? Not basing it on what somebody deserves. Not basing it on how much they've done for us and how long. Not basing it on what they did before that we saw, we experienced, it impacted us personally, or maybe it didn't, but we just know about it. We're not very proud of it. What would it look like? Instead of parsing out who deserves it and who doesn't, just giving out grace freely to people. What would that look like? Perhaps you're like that prodigal, that you've been out on your own, you've been apart from God, and you need to come limping back to him. Perhaps you're like one of those rejects. You're the last one picked. You feel unwanted. Now, whether you've rejected God or you just feel rejected by the world, whatever the case may be, there is space for you in the family of God. And it is not too late today to accept this call. There is still grace left for you. It never runs out. There's never a point where we say, oh, all those more holy people came and they got all the grace. I'm sorry you were too late. It ran out. But there is still grace for you today. And grace is one of those wonderful things that you can give it away and not run out of it. You don't carry a little bit of grace in your pocket and you give it out to people and say, I'm sorry, I'm all out of grace today. No. That the grace abounds more and more the more that you use it. Maybe you'd like to join this church in membership. I know a lot of people who have been fed up by church from one experience or another. They felt like they weren't part of church. They felt like they weren't included, like they didn't measure up. But this is a loving family that welcomes in the rejects. We're all rejects. I think all of us can say here, but those of us who have been in church for some time can say, oh, we've all been rejects by somebody at some point. But we all know what it's like. I love an old phrase I heard from someone, I can't remember who I heard this from, but they said, I love you and there's nothing you can do about it. That's kind of the feeling you get here. We love you and we welcome you in. Can't stop us. You don't have to earn grace first. However the Lord might be dealing with you this morning, there is grace for you today. And likewise, might we be people who give grace to others. However he's leading you, whatever decision you need to make today, won't you please come forward as we sing this final song.